we have. Okay, welcome everyone. This is YC Finance Unity Crypto Community Calls. It's the second one that we have. Unity Crypto is this space where we fund more solar to go green. And I say I'm the chief activist. So it's all about sharing this building, this bringing on of real world assets on Gnosis chain. And yeah, we have lots to explain and lots to share. Last week we had the smart contracts and audit. These community calls are recorded and shared in the YouTube channel for people to watch and rewatch as much as they like. And today we will go into token model, the first version, the simulations, and together with Shui, who is both the data scientist and the token engineer. And we've been collaborating through BlockScience Labs. I think we will talk about BlockScience Labs and the solution in a separate session again, and I'm sure we will have more than just one session on the token model. Good. Before I give an overview that what is the design, development, and deployment method, it is experiment driven, and why. Maybe I will briefly give the context again. It never gets boring. So Unergy is a solar as a service, a scale up from Switzerland, and they're scaling into Europe. They're in Spain, now starting in Portugal, and I also bring them to Germany. And what they do is they own and operate solar rooftops. So they have this pre-financed power purchase agreements with commercial and industrial buildings. So this is the sweet spot where we focus on scaling. And the power purchase agreements are long-term. Unergy shares 50% of the solar revenues with the community through the YC token, and also the carbon value. So this carbon value is imbued in the YCO2 non-fungible tokens called carbon credits. They basically certify how much CO2 was avoided by replacing directly dirty or gray grid power by solar power production. And we have this in a very data-driven way. We have 30-minute resolution view into CO2 avoidance using grid data from UK, and of course the power production data from the solar installation that Unergy has, being a digital first and solar as a service business pioneer. Good. So we went into the tokens. So if anyone wants to refresh, the first community call was all about what's in those tokens and what are the functions. Just briefly, we get the data from the installations, we combine it with the carbon intensity data and the CO2 avoidance data. That gets into IPFS before it is community validated. Right now, the community is a handful, a little bit more than 2 hands. And Xiwei was both, as mentioned, data scientists working on the data modeling part. We will have a separate session for that as well. We had collaborations with artists to also make a unique visual from that CO2 avoidance data and have a proof of concept implementation. So that's what's in the YCO2 tokens. We have a limited edition of these 57 UK solar projects. These are schools. And basically, one second, the map view is the better. These are the 57 UK projects where we have the limited edition carbon credits, just about 2,600 tons roughly. And when we go into actually funding the solar rooftops, it will be in Portugal, and it will be through the YC token, the second, or the participation contract. And that contract makes sure that YC token holders, meaning signifying their participation in funding more solar, will get revenue shares from these newly funded solar, as well as the full carbon value. Now, so this whole ideas or the conceptualization was entirely community driven. The crypto carbon community was really high and active last year. So here are some links to the sessions that we had, or like a high level view of those sessions, just to get a sense of it. We found the potential buyers of the YCO2 offsets on chain are people and organizations on chain. Gnosis chain itself would be super interesting off-taker or user of these offsets, but also DAOs and Web3 natives who are closed or on Gnosis chain are interested, especially when it's about events coming together, people flying to events. That's when the YCO2 offsets make sense, and we can do it in a Web3 native way. But also the non-Web3 natives are interested in the whole transparency and traceability aspect of using the chain. And this is, Joey, best I will go into this, and then I would best give it over to you, that we see what you have modeled thus far from this overview. So what is interesting is once we have these contracts, these 3 contracts on or developed and putting on chain, we can have different ways of using them, right? So the YCO2 NFT smart contract that takes in the CO2 avoidance data and certifies the credits. Those can be minted directly by anyone on chain and who paid the high price of using this high quality carbon credits for offsetting. This is also what we say, yeah, it's an awareness campaign because the carbon credits, if they're cheap, they don't really have an incentive effect. But if people actually value these offsets at a higher price, they are creating incentives. So this is where we need to go. And this is, as mentioned, it's a limited edition. It's more of an awareness campaign, and people who participate in that campaign are signaling that 1 ton of carbon needs to cost at least 100 XDAI, in our case, to actually create incentives at all to go net zero by 2050. So that's a number that's been put out there by climate economists and scientists and is known. But we also know that this whole on-chain carbons are currently trading for $1. So this is what we've put together in the YCO2 contract, and the revenues from those offsets go into the multi-sig. They are used to make this protocol improved and better usable, but also what we don't use goes into actually funding more solar, and we do this also through the YC token smart contract. So this YC token handles XDAI coming in, and that XDAI goes to funding more solar. The revenue shares from newly funded solar goes back to the governance multi-sig, and that gets distributed to YC token holders through the revenue share contract. Now, people could and can also buy directly the YC token smart contract, but as long as we have these limited edition carbon credits and this awareness campaign, it actually makes sense to use it, to get to know the offset or the credit offsetting, how that can happen on chain in your wallet in a self-sovereign manner, and actually get the YC tokens rewarded for doing so. So, and that's what Shiwei, you're going to show, right? We could maybe, if we have time, I don't know, I always underestimate, likely we won't have time, but who defines these experiments, the parameters, and so on. This is, of course, people currently active and working on this, who are the stakeholders who are bringing these assets on. So we decide, but also these experiments, of course, are not, not happening without experimentees, so participants and users of the protocol. And that is maybe really a session about community and community participation, if we had time. And today, the focus really is on the token model version 1. You can also see it in the light paper here from, yes, so that we have this first phase where we only sell the carbon credits, the alpha phase. This explains what you get. Then phase beta is actually where we release YC token. We won't see that today yet, but I would love to exchange with you, Shiwei, also, because that's, I think, the next thing we will also have to simulate before we launch or before we deploy the YC token. Because the goal is not to have just the terms of use or so, but actually also have a simulation where people can use your simulations also to understand what it is that they are participating in. So that said, here are the phases. Again, as an overview, phase alpha is all about testing and discovering the community, getting feedback, and that's what we have thus far. We know individuals and DAOs are interested. We have the smart contracts, all 3 audited. That's what we discussed last week and showed. The report is online. And now we're ready for actually launching the YC token, which means we're ready to fund more solar projects. And that's going to happen in Portugal. And it looks like it's going to happen through a refinance. So that's one thing I would love to discuss at the end. So we know what's next. The next simulation we do have to do before we can actually launch the YC token. And then what comes next is more of a plan, so more experiments to run and to solidify that plan. But where we want to get into is these rolling token emissions with a pool of solar projects that can be funded, and it's going to be a growing pool of solar projects where we have either refinance of existing projects or financing entirely new projects. Which has this dynamic of cash coming in, meaning revenue shares coming in immediately or within 4 to 6 months from funding. And then also using these experiments and data that we gain, including your simulations, that we put all of these together into what we call this model and data-driven governance, so that we use these insights to actually improve decision-making around pool structure to maximize rewards. In our case, this isn't just the revenue share that gets maximized, but also, most importantly, the environmental value as well. So the carbon credits from replacing gray grid power through clean solar power. Good. Let's see. So the focus will be YCO2 NFTs. This limited edition of 57 UK solar roofs, and where we say the revenue goes back into into improving the protocol, the smart contracts we did with the first 5K of revenues, the full deployment, some sponsoring and building, meaning improving the user experience. This is around at most 60K that we might need, and it depends of how much demand there is really to improve. Whatever we don't need from this limited edition will go into funding new solar projects in Portugal. And that means that will be the reward of the initial offsetters, the initial users, participants of the YC protocol who currently can use the YCO2 tokens to offset. So with that, Shiwei, I'll hand over to you and we go a bit deeper into the simulations that you have done thus far, looking into the limited edition of the carbon credit sales. I stop sharing. I can't hear you. You're muted.
No.
Yeah.
What about now? You're working
yes.
now? Okay.
Now
interesting. Okay. So here's the Python Jupyter model. Now we're hosting on the BlockScience Labs platform. And let me just show you what we can get for in the end, which is assuming you're a YCO2 token NFT holder, and we're saying you can buy it either in the low resolution, the 30-minute high resolution carbon credits, and you put in how much you want to pay for it. And then as here is the third parameter of how much YCO2 has been sold overall for the whole market, which is just like different market conditions. And then I can see what I get. So let's say there's like less than half of YCO2 being sold in the whole market. I don't think it's updating, huh? It seems like Zoom sharing is changing it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's try.
Restart. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the first part that I want to show is like assuming you're a YCO2 token holder. Yeah. So here is how much total carbon credit I've got just from the YCO2 token. It's not anything in the future. And here's the total YC tokens you will get airdropped in return. And here's the total revenue shares throughout actually like a 15-year contract period. This is the total return you get from the revenue share of all the new solar roofs that you've supported. And we can see from the beginning, there's like a preparation phase because each new project needs some time to start before they can start to generate the solar revenues. And then it will be like a linear increase here. And let's say the whole market has is more successful, people are buying a lot YCO2 tokens. And then because more money are here to fund more solar projects, you can see the total revenue share has increased, even though you are having the same YC tokens, but they actually worth more. The idea. And then of course, if you big buyer and buy a lot of then you get more revenue share throughout the years. And overall, here we can see if the market is better, then the everyone's just getting more of the revenue share. So let's go into how we get this plots.
So
The
this
first part
part is
yeah.
what you did for actually people who participate, that they can simulate for themselves, right? And that's the
Yeah,
part
yeah.
where we want to input into the smart paper,
Smart
where you
paper.
don't just get to read what it's about and see some excerpts of simulations, but where you can also input what if scenarios for yourself. Like, what if
Yeah,
I would actually use it for my offsetting my carbon footprint?
yeah,
As a DAO, I could think about, okay, what if I offset all the past years? And what is the reward I'm getting? Is because each participant is helping us get over the line to actually be able to fund more solar. Um, that more solar gets back as more rewards to the initial public offsetters, I'm calling them now.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, cool.
exactly.
And behind that, you have a lot more of
Yeah,
simulations that we did.
it can be simple. Don't be intimidated. Uh, okay. So even if you don't understand all the Python code, I'll just explain in the plain language. The first part is YCO2 token available, meaning like from this previous UK data that we've processed, here are the carbon credit pool that is available for sale now. And then the next part is the project pool, which is from the sale of YCO2, we're going to find more new projects in Portugal. So here we're simulating a potential new pool. So the data here is actually not the most precise. It's actually modeled from the previous UK projects. So once we get more precise estimate of how the new Portugal projects would be like, we can update this part of the model. But here we have a pool of like, let's say 100 potential projects. And then we need to first decide, after having this YCO2 token sale, and we have a lot of fundings, and then exclude all the operational cost that Sebnem just mentioned, for the rest to go into the new projects, which of those projects will be funded? And here we have different funding priorities to set. Like, do we want to fund projects that has highest revenue, or project that start to generate revenue sooner, or like different ways to decide what projects are funded by setting different parameters here. And then from those projects that will be funded, we can get the total revenue from once this project go into operation, how much revenue will be funded, for how long, etc.
And again,
And
just to explain, so these solar powers on solar rooftops on commercial and industrial building, the off-taker of this power purchase agreement actually goes into agreement of 10, sometimes even 15 years to pay a certain amount monthly. And that's around 40% cheaper than them using current electricity markets from retailers or from the grid. And they so basically that's good and plannable for them. So especially for commercial and industrial, it's interesting deal. But also for us, it's good to know that these power purchase agreements, the way Unity does them, are actually inflation adjusted. So they work with CPI, consumer index. Just to mention that here.
yeah, cool. And then, so overall, energy protocol perspective, what are we gonna do with those money and the potential revenue? Then we do the plotting for each individual participant of how much fund you are going to buy and what ratio of that share among all fund, and therefore calculate what you're gonna get in terms of carbon credit and in terms of YC tokens and in terms of revenue share in XDAI unit. And yeah, the last part is just plotting some Python tricks. So that's the overall mechanism for the YC model.
And So this is the newest version, and we're not going to use the other ones that you had previously gone into, where you could see like if my participation is or basically yeah, you had these different plotting of participants who come in with less or more.
Yeah.
What
What you're talking about is like if I'm changing different parameters, they're gonna show in the same plot to directly contrast the difference.
Yeah.
That was for the internal analysis.
So just a question, also thinking out loud, because you know what is it that we're going to communicate and explain, whether that comparison would be helpful in understanding. Oh, Chris is coming in as well, or whether basically it's better that we just leave that per user simulation.
Yeah, we can definitely include that in the smart papers for like an overview if someone's not exactly going to buy the YCO2 token for themselves, but instead want to just have a general idea of if I buy more or buy less, what's gonna happen. Then yeah, those would be useful graphs to show, rather than for like this interactive part, we're just letting you input what's the condition, how much you want to buy and stuff.
Okay, so good.
But yeah, I can actually show the previous results.
Yeah, just to also refresh my mind. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So here like are 3 plots of sale conditions. So it's designed kind of actually to say how much of the YCO2 has been sold. If we didn't sell a lot, then it doesn't even cover the operational fee. That's why no revenue.
That's why 0, nothing goes into new solar. Yeah.
And then instead, if we have actually relatively good sale for the home market, then here we can see it's the same trend before, but if you buy more, of course, the revenue share you're gonna get is more. And if the sale condition is really ideal, like all the YCO2 we have now are being sold, then you can see everyone is actually getting more revenue share if you look at the y-axis. Yeah, that's the idea.
Cool. Yeah, I think like that one overview in the general or in the explanatory part, we'll definitely reuse these. I have one question. Now, this is really for the YCO2 NFT or the limited edition, and it's taking all data that we have of the 57 UK schools, right?
Yeah.
And there we also have in the data like the different distribution of how the revenues come in, the cash in, basically.
Yeah.
So why don't we see this in the plots as well? Like, why do we see this linear? Is it because you're simplifying or
yeah?
Okay,
I
gotcha.
simplify to get a like monthly average. But
okay.
Yes, you're saying like some months there will be more, some months there will be less, and if we have more realistic simulation, we can see those up and downs. And I didn't go into that detail because the current simulation actually won't represent the new particle polls.
Yeah. Okay. So, and again, like the average, this is also just to give an insight into this participation. Yeah. And as always, I see this like if you are a big ticket participant, as always, you get much higher returns, whatever it is, right? And that's something I'm still inclined to continue think about.
Yeah.
I'd like to turn the tables a bit more into distributing, but let's see. I mean, in the beginning, it's really just about getting value aligned participants who understand and who want to signal the carbon value of solar is there and they're seeing it. And especially if it's going to help fund more solar, they're willing to pay much higher than the commodity prices on the market. So literally we're getting our activists together. That's the first deal. But when we scale, I think it will be a lot of questions from the participants themselves, like a DAO or a chain participating and enters into a long-term relationship also with this protocol when they say we're going to offset our carbon emissions due to the computing. We are going to offset it in real time from now on, right? And that's, again, a much closer participation than one-time offsets and so on. So these are all the nuances I think we will get into. But what I'm meaning and mentioning with experiment-driven development and experiments that only happen if there are experimentees is really that we get value-aligned participants and they get to actually also decide and design or decide on their experience, like what is it, what is the fair value of participation and sharing in that, in the solar wealth that we are creating and managing together. Good, Chris, welcome.
Hi, I'm the other Chris at BlockScience. I don't think we've gotten to meet, but it's great to meet you, Stefan.
Exactly. I was just thinking, is this a mock-up
yeah, I can start
of the other Chris, but no, all good. Hey, hey.
I didn't want to disrupt the flow. I was coming from another meeting, and I just wanted to be able to drop by and see everything going well, and just say hi.
Hi. And also we're going to have another session, maybe when the work or collaboration is done and we have the publication on the BlockScience Labs platform and app where people can actually interact, then we should definitely also have a proper session with all of you.
Yeah, we're very excited about the forthcoming smart paper with you. I think it'll really improve the way that people do sense making in a more collaborative way. Like the way I sort of described the smart paper is now you have a social object that you can share on Twitter, and then people can just like play with the dials and build an intuition for what your system is saying, and not have to read math notation that might be a little bit of beyond them to try to gain that understanding. So we think it broadens the scope of shared understanding on these systems.
Yeah, that's what's really important. Definitely also why we've spent all these years in token engineering, that we want to enable informed participation and not just, people saying, okay, this seems like they have a paper and it has math in it, so it seems like, and then they just still look at what others are doing, and that's not really informed participation. But as you say, building that intuition is also going to help everyone to become a better participant.
Precisely.
So I am super excited.
Yeah, and we had looked a lot at what the Common Stacks organization did for the augmented bonding curve, and we're like, that's really sexy. It's amazing. They also had to build everything very custom. It's like that's not a sustainable way of getting there. So we feel that smart papers is sort of a really nice way of gaining that value without having to do all the web development to get there.
Exactly. No, super cool. So I definitely look forward to be able to share that in a dedicated community call again.
Wonderful.
But today we have a couple of more minutes. Shui, if I can use that to go back to I think we're done with what we wanted to do. But now it looks like the Portugal project is actually the funding is actually going to start with a refinance. And we have gone through all these scenarios and we knew that they're possible. We just didn't know which one is going to start how. Let me share again my screen. And here, yeah, and then also the pools. Pool structure. Yes. So now number one, this is the MVP, and it has given us a lot of insights, but also it is now cluttered and definitely needs a UX brush. So some of the revenues will go into making this more separated, landing page away from the app, and also clearer separation between existing projects that are of which the carbon value can be bought with XDAI versus newly funded projects where you either participated through YC token or you got the YC token as rewards for your offsetting. You're participating either way in the revenue share and carbon value of this newly funded solar, but that means you can just claim those XDAIs and claim those YCO2 tokens because of your YC holdings. So these are different experiences and they need to be separated, but that was just a side remark. Let's get back to what we need for the simulation. Now we have whilst we were developing, we started with the UK projects just to have data and so on and so forth, and got this feedback, hey, actually these high quality carbon credits are something people want to see. We just don't know how and how much rewarding is needed to make it really pay off for participants. Now it's already 14 projects. Then during that time, we started getting more and more Portugal projects, and the first pool that we're going to fund is also going to be in Portugal. We want to go in the first emission just up to 2 million worth of new solar projects in Portugal. Again, it's just the first emission and it will be rolling funds. The more participants and demand is there, the more projects are in pipeline, the opportunities that we see, then we can basically create another emission.
Just to clarify, this is emission of YCO2?
No, the YC token, like that,
Okay.
that YC emission, it will have always a representative pool behind that is definitely potential or clear that can be funded. And again, like if these are new projects, then the money turns into the solar projects and they get online and return or bring on their first revenues 4 to 6 months from funding at most typically.
Yeah,
But,
so this is
yeah.
like you're buying YC token instead of getting airdrop because you bought the YCO2 token, but then all the revenue share after that will be the same way.
Exactly. So the revenue share will be the same. And then again, it might be, we will see like what speaks to the people faster. As long as they recognize the value of the offsets, also for themselves, it's very likely they will always go through the YC token. So they use it as an offsetting product and they get the YC tokens as rewards for the community. It doesn't really matter because our aim is to fund more solar. That's it. Yeah. We're basically using the carbon value of existing projects that we have because currently they're just on the table. I mentioned this multiple times. We'll also provide the links and explanations and everything. Why the current rules and regulations are made for big solar farms or big wind energy farms and so on, to actually participate in things that called renewable energy certificates. And that just doesn't pay off for small and mid-scale solar projects. And project developers like Unity, they just focus on doing their job instead of talking to or filling out these regulatory things. But here, if we can do this in a data-driven way, use the ledger as the registry, we are getting rid of so many overhead costs that, of course, it's a no-brainer. But then, on the other hand, we do need the that value to be seen and used. Again, for us, this funding or the YC token has always been more in focus. That represents and also handles in an automated way then getting the revenue shares from the newly funded solar and then sharing it back with the community read YC token holders. Now this is the new piece. We had it conceptually, but we have not really gone into it because we thought maybe it will come at a later point. But now it looks, it doesn't just look like it is going to be the case that one of our stakeholders, TED, is actually providing the funds in euro, basically, to get these projects tokenized. So instead, or that euro deal is happening because it's a bigger deal, but that value will be tokenized. Like the representation of these 14 projects, it's a bit more than 1 million. That will be tokenized, and we get all the data from these 14 projects. So now definitely, because we're doing the refinance. And what is also the difference with the refinance is, of course, the YC token holder gets the revenue share every month. Like when the cashing comes, the accounts are swept, and in our case, it goes to the Monerium IBAN, finally, of Unity Crypto community. Then the multi-sig basically executes the distribute, or calls the distribute function on the revenue share contract, and then the YC token holders get to claim their revenue shares. So that's one thing, that just saying that we have this data and we have the numbers. Can we simulate the conditions of this first emission, which will be a revenue share? And again, here we had this refinance option. This is when basically the projects are already funded and the person or the organization, it could be also a third party that is coming in with existing projects, and they dock on to the Unity or Udera system. That's when we can actually refinance existing projects. Before we do that, we will always look at their historical data. That's what we're going to do with these 14 Portugal projects. And the monthly cash-in data, we analyze the cost, and then the YC token, how many tokens at what emission price. Considering these are going to get the revenue share of the next 10 or 15 years. Again, also there we have the exact time for each of these projects. How long is the power purchase agreement? So that, I think, for the simulation part is sufficient. We also have questions about how these tokens then can be traded or provided on DEXs and providing liquidity. I don't know, Shiwei, if that would be something that we could or should also simulate. The liquidity provision part, just
Yeah, that's
Uh,
definitely interesting. Just we need a lot more thought about that.
Yeah, okay, I see. But again, I think that's the good part of this, doing it like this, because Ted is definitely also someone who, owns these experiments. So he's the willing experimentee and the
Okay.
experimenter. I think what is even better is that we actually also test creating liquidity and seeing how it works, and actually get the data. So a bit of, what I would always say, oh my God, testing in prods, these crypto bros. But it's so much easier to actually get some idea about the dynamics, because they're just so different. Something like a Uniswap model that you can have, and I know they exist, is not going to give us any insights about what's going to happen with these tokens on Gnosis chain.
Yeah.
There are just so many different dynamics. Like balancer is there, but it's not the same as Uniswap. And it's there, but it's just got on recently. The balancer pools themselves have only just 5 million total value locked or moving around. So these are all things I believe if you would like, yeah, would you simulate that? It would take you more than half a year. But yeah.
We just need to clarify the question here. I'm seeing there are two parts. The first part is just with this new refinancing scenario, like how do we emit YC tokens? What are the price, the amounts? How does the revenue share work? And that's the part that we need to involve Ted to. Yeah. And then the next part, liquidity part, that's more further in the future project.
Exactly. And I believe, again, we will discuss this together, and maybe we also have a session when you have this refinance model, even together with Ted, talking about what is it that we need to learn about liquidity and the dynamics on Gnosis chain. I think that's also an interesting topic to actually discuss with the experiment participants, in this case, Ted and us. Okay, so coming back to the point, the summary. Yes, the next thing that is of interest is just the refinance part, and very concretely these 14 projects. We have the historic data and the cash in. This is what I need to get. And it will be about, okay, how many YC tokens at what price is this going to represent? And then I have a second addition to that. Like that's only the refinance part of 1 million. And then these tokens are going to represent these 14 projects, and the revenue share mechanism will be tested. So that's good. But then what if we, and it's not just at what, but I would actually like to emit really 2 million tokens. No, 2 million worth of tokens, meaning that people can buy in or get rewarded because they're offsetting.
Mm-hmm. So there's additional carbon credit reward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me also think this through. Maybe it is simpler or easier that we connect the two simulations, like the YC token. Assuming it's all sold out, this is the amount that we can actually put into funding new solar in Portugal. And we have the refinance part. Let's put those two things together. And I will still have this question, I believe, what if we had a pool that has 2 million worth of solar projects, with funds coming in from the offsets, with the refinance part of it, but also with the portion where people can buy in to YC token directly. Why? because I want to see if all ways are open. Okay,
Yeah.
and we have tested, do people also take that door? Or do they, if they have the option between, am I going to go YC token directly? How many, like, because I think this whole real world assets on Gnosis chain, people get that. Interestingly, the newest feedback that we're getting is that this whole carbon credit, it's so uncertain, and we hear all these, how do you call it? Not drama, but yeah, like methods being disputed, and then it turns out 90% of the direct credits are junk credits and so on. So that brought in so much insecurity that, yeah, let's see. Like, there are some people who get it, who want it, especially with respect to events, because that's also smaller scale. But on the Gnosis chain side, for example, we saw that they don't even advertise their Offsetra profile anymore.
Because of the controversy?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Okay.
you know, I mean, yeah. So all of a sudden, if it's more controversial, then why should we even, you know, go through that? So this carbon credit or the carbon value is there, is on the table. I just want to see which way people and organizations are more likely to take if we have all options open.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Okay, cool. We're at the top of the hour anyways. So I would stop maybe recording and sharing here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, for next step, what do you think would be best?
Well,